Whatever you want. I don't mean to insult anybody if I don't think their project is as good as my project, because that's how it is, right? Like we all think our project is the best
Really?
project.
I don't think my project is the best. I think it's
Then
also
why aren't
like,
you working on mine? Mine's the best.
well, you never invited me. You never invited me.
See, there you go. Um,
Uh, so yeah, uh, I don't know. We can dive in, or you can tell me about your project and
well, I mean, I think so. I didn't go to the RegenOS meeting, right? And of course, I saw it, and you invited me, and someone else invited me. And the first thing to say about it is, wow, more than 100 people showed up. And I don't even know those conveners. Like, I don't know their names, but I got invitations twice, and more than 100 people showed up. So there's some power in what they're doing to bring people together. And I don't know if I could convene 100 people. I never have done that. Just sent out an invite and got like, okay, we got to get, that's a real skill and capability that not everybody has. So that's the first thing to say. And and I don't take it for granted. It's real. That's a real thing. What my feeling about it is that we don't know. This is what always been one of my complaints, right? Is um we don't know. Nobody knows. I don't know. Nobody knows what the next operating system is going to be, or whether it's going to work. And a lot of times you'll see people constructing something. It might be an onboarding to a platform or some very large set of documentations, and I'm sure you know who I'm talking about, where they explain how the next operating system is going to be. And it might even just be something like the degrowth movement is like that. Like we know how it's going to be. There's going to be some orchestrated, who's going to orchestrate it, right? Like some orchestrated thing that the elite who and again, I'm saying elite because the elite is the people who created whatever orchestration system it is, because they know, and the rest of us don't know. And we haven't tested it out, but we are pretty convinced that it's going to be good and certainly better than what we've got. Now, I can almost guarantee it'll be better than what we've got because, it'd be really hard to do worse. So, but I don't think that we're at the point of saying, let's deploy an OS globally. I think that where we are as, I don't know what to call us, like ragtag bunch of hippies pretending to be an industry,
the Rebel
you know,
Alliance.
the Rebel Alliance, there's sort of and we are a ragtag bunch, and some of us have more corporate experience or less corporate experience, but we're kind of, technologists and freedom advocates and meta crisis people, and we are the global majority, right? As XR is sort of transforming to say, we are the majority of people in the world saying this is not working for us. But as a ragtag of group of people who are thinking about six systems change, we we are at the point where what you would really ideally want to do is fund as many regional experiments as you can, right? As regional level, because for 50 years we've had little pockets, right? We have NGOs that are doing good work. We have eco villages and intentional communities that are doing good work. We have many small scale, I'm going to say Dunbar level, whatever, under 500 people, which isn't the right number, but whatever, under 500 people experiments which are working well. But what we don't have is the connectivity tissue on a regional level. And my sense in terms of timing is that we aren't at the point where we want to create consensus among ourselves and do a regen OS for everybody, but that actually what we want to do is sprinkle around these experiments and be running as many of them simultaneously as we possibly can in different regions of the world, because everybody has different flavors and cultures and languages, and see which ones start to succeed and grow. And so the premise of let's all get together and agree I already get scared when I hear that. Like, we're going to get 100 people in a room and we're going to agree. And I think we do agree more or less on two things. One is there's a real crisis, and we may be have different, slightly different perspectives about the cause of it, but there's a real meta crisis. We might call it a poly crisis or whatever you want to call it. There's a real crisis. And we agree that the next system needs to be in service of life because we all would like to be alive and we'd like the other things on the planet, whether it's the whales or the cats or whatever it is, to be alive. So we all agree on that. And I don't think we need to agree on anything else. And I do think we need to start experimenting. And so the premise of the RegenOS for me is not the way that I would express the premise. They maybe think exactly what I'm saying, right? They might think that's true, but the way it's expressed is different than how I would express
Oh, thank you. So I was started taking notes in the middle because there's many points.
it. But you've
So
got a fathom note taker, man.
yeah, but I want to respond to your points now, not looking at it. So to begin with, so the genesis is partially my thinking, my conversations with Pavel Luksha. I don't know if you know him, if you came across him. He's in the regenerative. He's writing a book about, and he started with the regenerative economy OS. And I'm a name shortener, so it said regenerative society, bigger than it. It just ended up being RegenOS. It's a horrible name, and it keeps on sticking us in the foot because for me, actually, a key part of the thesis is that we need consciousness evolution and technological evolution to come together. That if we have consciousness evolution, more meditation, spiral dynamics, and I've seen this in the teal organizations movement by itself, it doesn't have the power that it needs to really spread through society. Ideas spread through society now is through technology, right? And we see this with the algorithms that are crashing democracy by creating division, right? We don't need to wait for artificial intelligence to mess up society. It's been doing it for 10 years because my feed is a kind of artificial intelligence, right? So we
You're very
all
kind about the 10 years.
I mean, it has been well
At
understood
least,
for,
at
I
least,
mean,
yeah. Hmm.
when did the Netflix documentary come out, right? It's been a bunch of
Yeah,
years.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
it's clear that ideas and society is fundamentally shaped by technology now, and that we can, and that if the technology is not shaped by our views, our values, then we just end up going to multiplying the worst characteristics of game A. And there's one quote that I really love from the Palantir guy, who's actually very smart. I watched the video with him. I agreed with 80% of what he said, just not his vision of what the future should look like. But he said, or there was an interview of somebody that worked there and said, like, Palantir went, democracy, it's messy, it's complicated. We won't bother with that. We'll just control the technology stack of society and shape the future that way. There was a light bulb moment for me because there is similarly wise AI and these things. If we do not intentionally come together and have a conversation of what values are we putting in, it is no longer true and probably hasn't, it certainly hasn't been true since social media, but it's definitely not true that technology is value neutral. So if we are not consciously thinking of what technology, of what values and what worldview the technology is bringing forth, then there is no way to bring forward the bigger ideas. Now, I'm a technologist, so I agree with you. It's not one thing, it's many things. However, we need underlying protocols that let us move in a much richer way between software. I do not want to make any more profiles. I do not want to make a new social graph. I need the ability to move from application to application with my friends, with my social graph. and to develop new protocols. We have, I mean, what protocols have we developed over the last 25 years, right? Okay, we keep on iterating HTML, but that comes from the 90s. We've failed on the chat protocols. Blockchain did a bit of a thing, but it hasn't become mainstreamed in any kind of way, shape, or form. So I believe that in order to create, and we've been running small tech experiments for 20 years, right? I've been hearing open source, this, that, open office, high-low. There's so many of this. Everybody's making their own alternative social platform, right? And it's too many small experiments. So I believe what we need is we need to find a way to create the movement so that there is shared protocols that will enable lots of rich applications and many applications. To me, RegenOS is not one thing. It's 1,000, 1,000,000 different applications, but with a set of much richer primitives underneath. A social
Right.
graph that you can move from application to application, sovereign data, those things. But for me, it's especially the social graph, and one which is richly annotated by different applications.
Right. You sound like Arthur Brock
Like
10
who?
years ago. Arthur Brock 10 years ago. Is
I
my
mean, good
volume not good?
ideas never go
Right.
away, right?
No,
Until they
but
get
like,
implemented.
I'm not saying that, right? What I'm saying is that, yes, it is a good idea. And there are small teams who have been working on it. And some of them have succeeded and not succeeded in different ways. And adoption is key. And it's not clear that the path towards what you were saying is to bring a whole bunch of people thinking about this together. Like it is possible. So, first of all, it's not clear that any of your assumptions are true, right? Like, oh, we have to bring consciousness and technology together. I think so too, but I'm not sure I'm right. I mean, I'm pretty confident that I'm right. But um, anyway, but so this sounds exactly like the holochain, right? How and scepter vision that Zippy and Art came up with. And they're not wrong. And they tried some stuff and maybe they're making progress. Like I'm tentatively optimistic at this point, right? Which is better than I was a year ago. A year ago, I was like, I haven't written them off. But what they're trying to do is incredibly hard, right? Which includes everything, including changing the URL system, right? Like it's very complex, right? And if you start talking to them about Scepter, you could do that for a lot of months, and they might be the smartest people in the end, and they might not. They might be completely unrealistic and going down the wrong and path for creating this new OS, right? And I'm giving them as an example because they're way ahead of us in terms of how much they've developed. So that's one direction you could say. And I think you and I would probably agree that that's one of many of the things that I said we should all be trying out for different applications and deployments. And the reason they've gotten as far as they've gotten is very simple, right? It's because they got more money. And you can see the same with Dark Matter Labs, right? Indy Johar has a whole bunch of things under his little umbrella and it's a big umbrella under Dark Matter Labs. He's a genius and trying a whole bunch of experiments and able to direct funding into places where he and his team believe are appropriate, including, the river's going to speak for itself. We're going to create this AI system that's going to allow like there's really amazing stuff already going on in this area, not under the umbrella of RegenOS, but with these separate projects. And so that's the other thing about the premise, which is interesting, and I like it. And the question of who gets the money is kind of there's ways that that gets decided in the current universe, and the two projects that I've mentioned have some money, and there's other ones, right? You could look at what's going on with Audrey Tang and Taiwan, and they have some funding for that because they're working with the Taiwanese government. You can look at what's happening in Bhutan, and there's a bunch, at least dozens of projects that I wouldn't say hundreds, but dozens of projects that have fair amounts of funding to do what we're saying we want to do with RegenOS. And I think that's great, right? And I do think, again, I don't want to say anything. against what RegenOS is saying. I'm just saying, okay, that's happening.
So I love it that you brought in the investment piece because this is another key piece in my thinking and why I do think we need a umbrella narrative and everybody doing their own little thing, which has been happening for 30 years. I've been hearing about crypto since 94 because Ian Goldberg, who was Vitalik's thesis supervisor, was 2 years behind me in university. So I kept on sitting around and listening about this stuff. And they were experimenting with this in the 90s. The If we do not have an overriding, some kind of an umbrella that we can all go under, then it's all just individual things. And we do not see ourselves, the power of how big we are, and the world of investment doesn't see that we are a thing in the world. This has been my really painful learning from my 10 years in the 12 years in the regenerative village building space is that if you do not belong to an investment narrative, it's impossible, very, very hard to get funding. You either have to have a rich uncle or some lucky with some government. You're not part of any investment runs along investment narratives, whether it's .com or AI now or SaaS or even regenerative agriculture or in the physical space, co-living. Co-living over 10, 15 years of hard work by many people has managed to create an investment narrative. It's niche, it's small, but it's a thing and people have heard about it. So I think in order to flow much more funds to the ecosystem of all of these projects, we need to create an umbrella investment narrative so that we exist in the world. And that's a key motivation for me.
So I'm thinking about that, right? Because I don't know if it's true. What I'm thinking about is how do you create, right? So I'm a Silicon Wadi person, right? And I understand how Silicon Wadi got created. And I don't think it's the pattern. I don't know how other types of investment areas got created. I don't think it's the pattern that you're saying that it is. What I think the pattern is, and blockchain, okay? So I'm going to say the pattern that I'm seeing that is the pattern that I think happens, but I don't know, right? So like not, this isn't an intellectual theory or how I think, but this is the pattern that I think happens. And the pattern that I think happens is that a bunch of people are able to, for some reason, get the training and knowledge to be experts at something. Silicon Valley is called Silicon Valley because it had to do with silicon, and I don't know exactly how that started, but in Silicon Wadi, you had a bunch of people who had enemies all around them and a government and a military service that paid for a lot of education and high-tech education, right? And then it paid for a bunch of things, right? So one of that is that, but the other thing is under that particular environment, and California has that, like where the miners, when we went out mining for gold, it has a kind of a thing. And Silicon Valley also has this like welcoming of strangers when we need to make new friends. But the military service has something really specific, which is we really, really trust each other. We really, really trust each other. And the crypto people do too. I recently went to Dark Prague. I mean, these guys who've developed Ethereum together, we were in the trenches together. I know I can trust your code. I know I can trust you with the multi-sig. So a bunch of people who were in certain circumstances together, which caused them to have a high level of trust. So what that allows is that if you're looking for a co-founder, you call your buddy and you're like, hey, we did that together. Would you do this together? And you're like, yeah, all right, I'll try it out with you because I trust you, right? So that was the technical side, right? Which I think we have in the RegenOS to some degree. To some degree, we also have a little bit of suspicion, but we know who we want to work with, right? The second thing that happened is the first one struck it rich, right? The first, I'm just going to call it the first one struck it rich. Maybe it was the first two, right? And the Ethereum ecosystem, that's really obvious. All of a sudden, we have money. Now we've got money in the hands of one of these people who trust the other 10 people. And the one of those other 10 people says, I've got this great idea and I just need this much money to start it. And the guy who was in the trenches with him, either literally or figurative, is like, I got 10 grand to spare or 50 grand to spare. Sure. Go ahead, give it a shot because I trust you. I know you're going to pay me back if it works out. And if it doesn't, I love you anyway. You're my brother, right? And that creates the capital. It doesn't it doesn't follow the pattern. If I look at both crypto and Silicon Wadi, which are the ones that I really know, it doesn't follow the pattern that you're saying. It follows a completely other pattern. And if I look at crypto, which is really small, so I really understand it a little bit better, even though the other one I was part of for a very long time, it fragments, right? You know who you can't trust also, like that guy, I'm never going to trust him again. And it fragments into different groups, and a large group of the people get completely sold out, right? Which again, you can see that in all of the examples I give. The people with the most money sell out to become a new elite, either a new elite or they try to join the existing elite. And I had an opportunity. I had a friend who was working at a hosting company that worked with big high tech companies, and she's like, "Oh, do you want to go to the Red Room?" And I'm like, "Red Room? I didn't know there's a Red Room." And they were in Manhattan. And all the clubs that are really fancy have a red room, and you can only get in there with, it's whatever it is, $500 a drink or whatever it is in the red room, and all their hostesses back there and whatever. And I'm like, sure, I'd like to. I've never, I'm not going to get invited to a red room any other way, but by somebody who works at that company, right? And so she's my cousin. We go back there, and it's like, and I run into somebody I know from the Israeli high tech scene, who's a CEO of it's like his third company. And I've run into him back there, and I'm just like, right, like, you know what I mean by the red room, like, everybody. And it was really hard being back there because my cousin, because she works at one of the companies that buys the services from the red room, she has to be nice to these guys who are hitting on her. It was horrible. It was like this horrible experience because you have to be nice to these people, like, even though it's like really inappropriate. It was just like this horrible, disgusting thing. But I could see that this CEO of a company that came from like another country had bought his way into the new elite, right? And within crypto, there's an elite, and some of those people, again, you don't want to talk about some of these people, but like they buy their way into, like the whole, what was it called? Like this whole Sam Bankman thing was about this guy bought himself into the existing elite by getting rich through crypto. And so some people will buy themselves into the existing elite, and some people will create a separate elite and stuff like that. And that's what happens to most of the money when these things happen. Now, we can really see it very hard in the refi space. If you look at what the refi organizations have, most of them don't have money. They don't because they're outside of that elite that got the money. And that's quite shocking and upsetting to look at, but it's the case. Right.
So
So right, the hypothesis, we're going to all get together, we're going to build a narrative, and somehow the money is going to come. It's not the pattern I see. Now, I could be wrong, but it's not the pattern I see.
So, I mean, there are a lot of things there. First, let me start with, I think crypto is a really amazing warning case of, and to me, the message, I'm not saying that that would be totally wrong, but it's happened before. Moses came down from the mountain. He just left the people alone for a little while. So somebody needs to smash the tablets on top of crypto's heads. I don't know who it's going to be, but it's a perfect example of technology without deeper values just gets succumbed by the game A, the worst of the extractive, right? Digital technologies today are a massive multiplier of whatever behaviors we choose to multiply, or almost any kinds of behaviors. And if we don't direct it, then we end up, yeah, the people who it is a battle for the soul of humanity. So crypto is a perfect example of what happens if you don't tie in. And the technologists thought that decentralization, why? Because decentralized is better. Why? Because it's decentralized. The circular agreement argument, it was not enough. It was not enough of a value to keep the technology from being sucked in into the worst tendencies of the existing system and the worst tendencies of nouveau riche. So that's definitely why embedding it into the thing. I one thing that's
But again, I don't,
one thing sorry one thing
yeah,
that I really want to emphasize is I am not claiming that I have answers.
right.
What I would like to think though is I have interesting questions, and the fact that a lot of people have jumped on indicates to me that these are interesting questions worth exploring. I have some ideas that, investment narratives get created by people talking about it, papers being published, conferences happening, da da da. But I don't know. But I am sure that the question of how do we create an investment narrative and an umbrella that will funnel much larger significant funds to technology for building a better future is an important set of questions to engage with. Also, this year I went to the Systemic Investment Summit in London at the start of the year, and it was a bunch of people talking about these kinds of ideas, doing work, and I don't know, there was something like 2 trillion assets under management represented. It was serious money, very serious money. And what I took away from that is they're looking in the right directions. They have access to significant capital, which in today's day and age is hundreds of billions. And I don't think they have the tools, and they don't have the idea of investing technology into technology as a way of achieving systemic change, right? You invest in water or agriculture. All of those are hyper important. But I think if we create an umbrella narrative of there is such a thing as technology for good and it's important, then we can siphon off a couple 100 million from those hundreds of billions of systemic investing, impact investing towards the kinds of technologies that over the last 20, 30 years, because it's been 20, 30 years of experimenting with alternative technologies, we know point to the direction of what is needed.
Yeah. That's a hypothesis. It might be right. I want to say two things about that. First of all, I wouldn't be as critical of crypto as you are because crypto people donate a lot of money. Crypto people percentage wise tend to donate more than normies because there's a weird relationship to money and it's like it came to me magically, I want to give it away. And so there is a percentage of money in the crypto world that is given away to good projects. Now, what they think is good might be different than what you think is good or whatever, but I do think that they're a generous crowd and some percentage of that money, like I said, the large percentage gets corrupted, which is the pattern I just described. The small percentage goes in there. It may or may not be that if you get a whole bunch of RegenOS people together and they create this narrative and they get 200 million or a billion or it may be that the same pattern will repeat itself where most of the money gets corrupted and some small percentage goes to projects and it may be that the way that you create it is something new. I can tell you that it's being created in a manner that is a little more centralized than it needs to be, but that's okay too. Well, there's a set of topics that have been predetermined, and the goal of creating this narrative has been predetermined, right? So those are predetermined goals of the RegenOS group, which have been created by the new elite in the group and not discussed yet. But maybe they will be discussed. And I'm not saying they're wrong or anything like that. Like I do think leadership is important. You say, look, this is what I'm up to. Who wants to come? And lots of people come. That also is a way of creating consensus, right? Nobody had to come. It is problematic though. The second thing I want to say is it's problematic when you start to like once the money comes in, right? Like creating who gets it, right? That's really a problem. Like, let's say you do get that money and distributing it. So yeah, your hypothesis may be correct. And it may be that by creating this narrative, it will bring in funds. Uh, And the other thing is, I'm already pointing out in my first point is that like some of that money is coming in by people who already have good connections and already can get the money in. This is a group, okay, I'm going to say it out loud. This is a group of people who didn't raise the money yet because the people who did raise the money didn't come to that meeting. The people who actually know how to raise the money didn't come to that meeting because they raised the money and they're doing the projects that they think are best and trickling that down through, right? So, like the whole thing about where the money goes is it's really a it's like that's how it looks, right? The person who raised the money decides where the money goes. Is that good? I don't know, but it is.
Uh, I would say that I am flattered because you're evaluating the whole project by criteria of a project that is much, much more advanced than we actually are. I had this idea early in spring. I threw up two articles on LinkedIn. I got some people to talk about it, and then suddenly this thing which I inspired other people to make happen, and 150 people showed up to have a conversation about it. That's all it is, right? It's
That's all
not
it is.
and for me, you're right. I don't know how any of my, whether any of my hypotheses are true. The way I have started to, or the way I test my ideas these days is I throw them out into the world in concentric circles. I start with my friends or the people I know who won't judge me too much, and then bigger and bigger. And then, after a few months, I'll post it on LinkedIn, right? So for me, it's an invitation to an exploration. And the question is, do people think it's something interesting and worth talking about? And it seems so, yes. There was a lot of in-depth in-person conversations in Czechia, and there were a bunch of organizations there that had gotten funded. So people seem to think that it's important to start talking about how all of these little experiments start interoperating and what technologies could be shared. One thing which I think, and there's a huge number of things to be learned from the crypto world. One important thing I think is crypto has learned and understood of what it takes to launch a foundational technology into the world. So I don't follow crypto, but I have enough friends in it that I always end up looking at something. And there is the new, what is it called? The Monad blockchain that's launching. It's a level one blockchain. So they're launching a foundational technology into the world. They raised $250 million. They're starting with 250 million. And that's in the range of what I think it takes to launch a basic technology on which you want lots of people to build things on. And that's one thing that I want to put into this regenerative world is for people to really start thinking bigger, not 100,000 crowdfund from my friends to develop some software. I think the time for little experiments, and Holochain was a great example. For some reasons, they seem to have stalled technologically, and we've been waiting for many years. They haven't really launched at scale. Also, I think they overemphasized basic technology, which is maybe what was needed when they started 8, 10 years ago. And I've been following them since the meta currency project, so I know where they came from. I think what we need to do now, or what I really want to catalyze, is starting with the conversation of what are the apps that we imagine, and working back from that, what are the foundational technologies that we need to assemble out of the pieces, which, like you say, people have been working on for the last 10 years or 20 years, right? So yeah, bunch of
So,
different hypotheses there. I don't know which are true, but Monad is got $250 million to launch a level one blockchain. I think that's at the level Maybe it's 50 million, maybe it's 500 million. I don't know, but it's not 100,000, it's not a million. And we need to start thinking bigger in the region space tech, in the region tech space.
Totally agree with you. I don't know if the way that crypto does it is transferable because, like, to me, I don't know how they got that money, but I suspect it was from friends who trust them because that's how the Bros Club works. And that's my observation, but maybe you know something I don't know, right? Like, that's what I described is like once you've got this Bros Club that has money inside of it, the bros keep giving each other money and the numbers go up. Right? Did they get money some other way than from other crypto bros?
I mean, at that level, the money comes from VCs, right? The
Right,
money
but
has to.
those are their brothers who made a lot of money at the previous crypto project. It's exactly the pattern I described. How they're launching these things with big money is the pattern I described. Some people got rich. They started investing their money in the next thing. They got richer, 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 richer. That's where Elon Musk is and Peter Thiel and those people. And that's where the crypto bros are moving their way up that scale. That's what it looks like to me. But I could be wrong. That's what it looks like to me. Is that they created their own ecosystem. When their ecosystem had more money, they put the money back into their ecosystem. And so that's different from going and pitching to an investor. That's putting more and more of the money you've got into the ecosystem.
So Elon
So,
is a Elon. I mean, they don't print the money; they suck the money out from the world at large. Elon is a perfect
whoa,
example of a story-driven, right? There is no sane, rational analysis that could explain Tesla's stock price. It's the myth of Elon. He has created a massive narrative, mythical narrative around himself, which has enabled him to suck an amount of money from the world, which is way outside of what he actually produces in terms of cars. He's a perfect example of the myth and the narrative driving where the money goes.
okay. I don't want to go into that because that's a rabbit hole that we're not going to go into. But it still fits into my theory of people who know each other, believe each other's narratives, and trust each other with the money. And that's like, I don't want to go any further down that hole. Like, you might have a different theory about how it happens. But it's something we can produce and it's something we can reproduce. And I would argue that some of the people in our industry are doing that in different ways where they're starting small, getting more money, reinvesting it into projects that they like. And I would say that we're already at that phase of starting to build that momentum among ourselves. And it's an optimistic view. Like, we are doing it and it's just happening. The the direction I want to go right now is about connectivity, right? And what does it mean? Because you were talking about the apps we want to build and getting everybody on the apps. This is the game A way of scalability. Like, we're all on the same app and there's a killer app and we're all on the app. So that is one
No,
view
no,
of
no. I said
scalability. Okay.
I said many apps with one underlying protocol and shared data layer.
Right. Okay. So protocol and data layer are those are two different things. I'm not sure if the data layer ever happens because we never got semantic web. We got is flight aggregators. And so what I argue in terms of some protocols become protocols like TCP/IP, and those are important underlying protocols. And some protocols don't ever end up like semantic web, but when there's a specific application, you get translators. So right now we have,
I
right? So
mean,
we have both English and Google Translate right now. So you can do either way. English is sort of, we're speaking English. It happens to be my native language, but within RegenOS, probably some people it is, some people it isn't, but we use it as a protocol and it's good enough protocol. And if we don't have that, we use Google Translate. And so we have both a translator and a protocol that we're all agreeing upon to operate. And so those are two different patterns that I think we're going to have both.
I'm sure as long as we're allowed to get the data out, right? Right now, the fact of the matter is I can't take my social graph anywhere. I can download after a 2-day wait, I can download my social graph from LinkedIn, but it's static and all of
I
this.
don't know why you want your social graph. Like this idea is weird. Like the social graph is, to me, I don't understand why I care about downloading my social graph. I understand single sign-on, but I don't
Interesting.
understand my social graph. Like my social graph in LinkedIn is different than my social graph in some other social media, which I don't have. I don't really have social media graphs anymore, right? I've got all the email addresses of people I need, and I'm not sure that I know what my social graph is or that it matters.
Okay, interesting. So now we have arrived at the crux of our different view of the world, because to me, it's the only thing that matters.
To me, it's a really
It's my
delusional way.
reputation, it's my
Nope,
relationships, it's my
nope,
connections, it's the
nope.
way
Yeah, it's your
I,
connections. Yeah.
it's and it's the way that I am able to scale my existence past the limitations of my neocortex remembering humans.
It's one possible potential way that could fit into that category. It is one possible potential pattern. This particular pattern is an individualistic pattern which focuses on the individual as the main holon, right? I am a holon and I have my network graph and you have your network graph, and that my reputation is a thing that is attached to me, right? My perspective, so this is where See, this is one of the reasons I have a real problem connecting to the OS. And I'm going to say it again, the part out loud, it's not flattering. I think my idea is better than everybody else's idea. And like I just do, right? And I don't think I'm the only one who thinks that about myself. But I find it really difficult because of the what I'm going to tell you is my pattern. I find it extraordinarily difficult to be in a conversation where you and I have to agree about this. I'd much rather that these people working on the network graph, which I think is bonkers, the network graph people get their money, and I, with my holonic graph, whatever group, community graph, it's not even a graph, my community perspective gets money for my thing, and somebody with some other thing, like staking as reputation, gets their money so that we can try these different things out in different places, right? So my perspective is completely different than your perspective. I think that my reputation is depends on the time of day and who I'm with. And who I'm going to behave in a certain way with is going to be different based on that, right? Like here, this is a public conversation. There's things that I'm going to say. And each time I say something that I'm kind of embarrassed to say in public, I say, okay, I'm going to say it, right? Because I know that like it sounds super arrogant and I hold it lightly. I could be wrong, right? But I think that the community is the key, not the network. And what do I mean? It's like if or if I go to a meeting representing a company, I dress differently than if I went to a meeting for an eco village. And the things that I would say and how I would behave would represent the entity that sent me. I'm going to say the entity that sent me, right? If my mom sent me to have dinner with somebody, I'm going to dress a little nicer. My family has a reputation for dressing a little nicer. Why? I don't know. My mom was really strict about that when we were kids, okay? And I'm going to show up on time. No, 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 because my mom's reputation is on the line. Not mine, but my whole family's reputation is on the line. And the same if I go for a company. I can't say something that isn't the company line. It's true you're a diplomat. And so I'm a different person and my reputation is different. Now, certain things about me are kind of consistent across those different moments. But then if I had a personal tragedy, maybe I'd start showing up late to meetings and whatever. Like, so my reputation is shaky. But within those bubbles, I'm going to call them bubbles because it helps people envision, like, oh, yeah, I belong to a family and the family is inside a bigger family, or I belong to a city and it's inside of a country or a neighborhood, right? Now, within those bubbles, the great thing about those bubbles is they can rehabilitate and enforce behavior. So they can go, Grace, you interrupted Victor 3 times during that conversation. Cut it out. And they have the right to say that because that bubble, let's say, is issuing me a credential saying I'm a member. That's the pattern that I think is much more useful because it means that the group as a group does its rehabilitation internally. They have the right to say to you, Victor, like you did a great job there, but we're going to have to send somebody to fix it. They also have the responsibility. Like we sent you out as a plumber from the plumbing company. You didn't do a great job. We're going to have to retrain you if you want to stay. And in the meanwhile, we got to send out another plumber to fix it so that when I hire a plumbing company, it's different than hiring an individual with reputation. So it has the ability vis-a-vis the outside, this bubble, it has the ability vis-a-vis the outside to make promises that the entire bubble has to vouch for. Not my network, not I didn't have coffee today or I had a tragedy in the family today, but this bubble has my back. And they're like, Grace, we're not going to send you out right now because like you just had this thing happen. We know you're not your best, take a week off. And that's their own, like the whole network as a whole doesn't get to do that. Only the bubble that I belong to when I represent myself to the other bubble. And that's the pattern that allows us to scale in a way that is much gentler than these network graphs. The network graphs are heavy and et cetera, et cetera. So this is what I think is the right OS. It's an identity protocol. Go on.
Uh, so I agree with everything that you said,
Hmm.
and I think that's completely my vision. At the same time, I want to be able to take that identity and that we log into a farming app. I can see that you're my friend and you're connected. Let's say we buy a piece of land together. And when we log into the local land management app, we don't have to rebuild everything from scratch. My relationships come across and my bubble comes, I can join as a bubble, right?
Yes.
And then I can get apps for my bubble without
Yes.
having to rebuild my bubble reality for every damned app that I do.
That's right.
So I love your vision. This is entirely my vision. I'm sorry if I wasn't representing what my
Well,
idea
it's a
is.
different, see,
I
it's the
what
architecture is different from the vision you said and the vision I said. The
well,
functionality is the same, but the architecture is completely different.
so again, I don't have a detailed architecture. I have a bunch of questions of how do we create a reality in the world which moves investment at scale to the kind of projects we're talking about. And the thing that maybe I disagree with you or maybe I didn't explain well enough is I believe that if we don't manage to create an umbrella in the world, which we put out, so people have XYZ, tech for good, whatever umbrella. Okay, I have this much AI. I am overexposed to AI. I need some tech for good in my thing, as well as my SaaS, as well as my whatever, e-commerce. If we don't create that shared box, which will enable all of our projects to get more funding, then we will continue to be small little things at the edges. And the other thing to really remember is each investment narrative comes with a whole set of criteria, risk evaluation, expectations, metrics. Uh, the way people look at an investment first comes from which box does it fit in. If I'm looking at a social media early stage company, then I know these are the engagement graphics the engagement numbers that I look at, which will be different from an e-commerce company, which will be different from a SaaS company. And I think all of the things if we want investors to start looking at the impact that we're having, we need to create a shared umbrella that we go out into the world for. And it's got to be big enough and it can't be controlled. I fully agree with you. It can't be controlled because if OpenAI decided to trademark AI and sue anybody who called their company an AI company, they would have not gotten anywhere. So that's the kind of question in my mind. How do we make it rain for everybody?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question, but it's not the question that I'm like, uh, hmm, it's not a question that I'm looking at because I think I'm right and I want to go after money for myself. And if I join that group, there's a disingenuous thing about it, right? I'm slightly disingenuous because I'm saying, yeah, we're going to create this governance model, and I'm the governance expert, and I want to join with this group, but I don't want to join with this group. I want money for my project. And so there's a slightly disingenuous way of joining. And I'm happy to do it. And as you can see, I'm perfectly willing to say that up front. I think my ideas are the best. I hope we get enough money for me. I'm going to be nice to you, but if there's money in that pot, I don't know how nice we're going to be to each other. Now, I'm an old lady, so I'm less likely to compete for that money. I'm more likely to leave than compete for money in that pot, unless I can tip the scales. Like I was in this group at this point, at some point where we had to decide on the topic for doing a little skit in front of the room. And it was a really unimportant decision. And I'm like, okay, let everybody come up with one idea and then we'll thumbs up for everybody else's idea, like whether we can relate to it, which looked really fair. But I knew everybody would thumbs up for everybody's idea. So I knew that it was only five of us. I knew I could just tip the scales wherever I wanted because everybody was going to say yes to everybody else's idea because it's a really friendly group. And so I knew that I could create this voting system, which would give me full control because everybody else was going to say yes to everybody else's idea. And at the end, I told them I had done that, and they cracked up because they were like, "We felt it was really fair." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, I'm a governance expert." Um, so we're going to create a governance system. I'm excited about that, where we decide how to distribute the money. And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, I'm an expert in gut, right?" It's not like, again, I'm not that sneaky and whatever. I'm much more likely to leave than to compete with somebody in
So,
our circle for money. I just won't compete with people in our circle for money. I won't do it. I won't do it on principle.
you'll be happy to know that I personally think governance is silly and it's not what's important in life because I'm an anarchist. And I have already shot down the idea of creating governance for RegenOS multiple times because for me, it should be an open idea like AI and if they create a governance system for it, I'll come up with the next suggestion for a name for an umbrella because actually this one is not great. I
But
think
everything
for
is
me,
governed. That's a lie. When the money comes in, it has to go somewhere. There has to be governance for that.
who is governing the story of AI?
That's not the question. The question will be, right? You are creating an entity, which
No,
the
no, 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 no,
big
no, 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 no.
an umbrella, which is supposed to
An
flow rain
umbrella
onto
is an
anybody.
idea, it's a narrative.
And who's going to present the narrative?
So this is the fundamental thing of moving beyond mechanical governance control paradigm into seeing that the world is driven by narratives and stories, which are beyond that. And we can shape these stories and influence them, but they are not owned. And if you try and control a story, what you end up with is not a story, but a brand, right? You end up with Walt Disney. It's a great example of how Walt Disney is trying to control Snow White or Mickey Mouse, which is trying to be a story and a narrative in its own world. And it keeps on going out of their grasp, but they keep on trying and control it. For me, it's an understanding that we're trying to build a better world, a better future. If anybody succeeds, we all are better off. Because if your project gets funded, I can then, when I talk to funders, say, look, Grace is working on software for a better future, and she got funded. I'm working for a software. It's a blue ocean mentality, right?
Hmm.
Our opposition is not each other. Our opposition is the old system, right? Anybody in game B gets some funding that's good for everybody.
So I would say, I definitely don't want to go too far over time. So I'm going to say one thing and then maybe you'll summarize and we can maybe say a final word, whatever you want to do. I would say we already have that narrative, and that's why you and I can say Schmachtenberger and we can say Game B and we can say Meta Crisis because there is, and we can say an economy that serves life. And I think the narrative is quite clear, and our general circle of podcasts and people is quite clear. So I would say it already exists.
Yes, that's it.
That's
Uh,
it.
I agree with you. I agree that between us, we have the narrative, but it's not something that's a spreadsheet line in investment companies' books.
Well, because it doesn't make money, Victor, and it won't make money.
So I think that's going to be the next conversation, why you should invest in technologies for building a better future. I think the resilience is a key part of it. And I think successful technologies, it will not make outsized extractive returns, but it can still make regular returns. And as the world becomes more and more volatile on the one side, and as more and more investment is moved into impact, systems change, which is happening, there will be more and more room for investments which aren't extractive. And that's what I'm trying to do, is to create a line in big funds, etc., books for technology, digital technologies, which are contributing to building a better future.
I think it's a fair ambition.
Thank
It's
you.
not my ambition, but I think it's a really fair ambition. I'm glad somebody's doing it. Because
Thank
if
you.
if you succeed, then maybe I'll be on the line item. Like I think it's a great ambition.
Well, I mean, I don't hope in succeeding in doing it myself. I hope in succeeding getting smarter and more gifted people who actually know to do this to come together. This is my role. I see my role as putting out some interesting questions and convening people. So I definitely can't do it myself. I don't come from those circles, but I can start the beginning of the conversations, and maybe if it's going to happen, then it will snowball piece by piece and it will happen.
That's great. That sounds good to me.
Wonderful. Thank you. We
All
came to an
right.
agreement. Yay. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for your involvement.
Thanks. Yeah, pleasure.